I was the director of marketing sciences for Apple's digital advertising division globally. I started making $12 an hour, which was equivalent to $24,000 a year, and I was 20 at the time. And when I finished at Apple in the advertising space, I was 30 years old, and I made up maxed at $175,000.
Welcome to Fortune Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Elijah. Today we have an amazing guest and an incredible mind, and she has an amazing story. Please welcome Juanita Rodriguez. Hey, Juanita.
Hey,
How
Jess.
are
Happy to
you?
be here.
I'm happy to have
I'm
you.
Thank you. I'm doing well. The sun's finally out here in LA, so
Yes, it's been nice
I'll
and
smile.
sunny. I love it's sad how much the weather correlates with my mood. So the sun has been like a happy, like, I don't know, dopamine or serotonin or whatever the word is.
It definitely gives us some perspective in LA with all this rain we've been having.
I know. And sometimes I feel bad because other people who actually have different seasons are like, what are they complaining about? It's like, what, 60,
Yeah,
70?
yeah, we're so blessed to have so much sun,
I know.
but now we can appreciate the rain too because we've had a good amount of it for us.
Yes, especially this past weekend. So, for the people who might not know, how do we know each other?
Oh my goodness, we go so far back. So I think it's been at least 10 years,
Mhm.
8 to 10 years.
Mhm.
I worked at a marketing agency, a large
Yeah.
conglomerate marketing agency.
Mhm.
And we were in an office in Playa del Rey. And Jessica was a colleague of mine in that space. And we hit it off from the get.
Yeah.
There were, as in many places, very few women and very few women of color. And yeah, Jessica's always been a bright, shining
Mhm.
star in office spaces, in group settings. And I gravitate to that because you're very
Oh,
authentic and
thank
you
you.
very much are who you are. And so, yeah, I gravitated towards that.
Mhm.
And we've kept in touch ever since from afar. We're friends that don't need to talk and see each other every day to have that
Mhm.
connection. And we're also people that support each other, and that's really important to me. So, here we are 8 years later doing this podcast. Couldn't be happier.
I'm so happy to have you. And yeah, you're just amazing. I'm sure as we talk, people will see why I love you. But yeah, you're one of those people who we just clicked like instantaneously. And we definitely bonded over like, there was really, really few women, let alone women of color in that office. So I was like, yeah, that's my girl. And I'm happy that we
Absolutely.
kept in touch. So taking it back to the very beginning, what did you want to be growing up?
Oh my gosh. Um, I remember being in elementary school. I had this amazing fifth grade teacher. Her name was Joanne Rutherford. And she was a very different type of human being. And I'm
Mhm.
so lucky to have had her
Mhm.
as an educator. And one of our lessons was write a like small paragraph about what you want to be when you grow up. And tell me why I put that I wanted to be a banker.
Really?
And yeah, so weird. But as I've progressed in life, I think what I meant to say
Mhm.
in my mind, I think I always knew I wanted to be some type of entrepreneurial.
Mm.
And I think I knew that the importance of income. And I think I knew at a young age the type of world that we live in here in
Yeah.
America and how it's necessary, unfortunately or fortunately, that to have income to
Right.
support whatever dreams or goals you have. So, long story long, I wanted to be someone that had disposable income to do the things that I wanted to do in whatever spaces that look like. And so I've always gravitated to, for a long time actually, I gravitated to positions that were high level positions that did make X, Y, and Z money, which, as we'll talk about, has
Right.
changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
So good answers.
I love that you had that kind of head on your shoulders because as a young kid, I don't know, I was on the playground. I don't know what I was thinking. I wanted to be in acting and singing and dancing. Like, I was just always playful. So I love that you had that perspective at such a young age, a young buzz.
It's like I have a terrible memory, but like, that's something I remember
Mm.
and for years I was like, why did I say that? Like, why would I want to? And then as I got older, I finally started connecting the dots. Like something I knew deep down, like that was going to be part of like my ability to like in a lot of ways save myself from a lot of the things I grew up in and
With
in how I was then.
Right. And that even leads to our next question was like, what was your upbringing like? What was your childhood like?
Yeah. So uh first off, like I really want to shout out Jessica for creating this space. I will say, like everything we talk about, I think is very much a perspective from, where I come from, my experience, being a woman of color, growing up in LA. And, but I appreciate that I can at least be a representation for someone else that shares similar experiences as me. So I definitely wanted just to preface with that statement because I'm not here to completely generalize
Right.
women and anybody and what their choices are and so on and so forth. Like
Right.
this is my truth.
Mhm.
I was born in Mid City, Los Angeles, and grew up there. We moved to Del Rey, which is adjacent to Marina Del Rey and Venice, and from like up until honestly, no, up until about 12 years old, I was what we call on the west side of
Mm.
LA. Um, my parents divorced when I was 6 years old, and
Mm.
my mom was able to move myself and my two older sisters into affordable housing,
Mhm.
or a lot of people call it Section 8 housing, also in Delray.
Mm.
And so we lived there till my mom could afford a down payment for a house in South Central. So we moved to a neighborhood called Hyde Park,
Mhm.
pretty much right in between Crenshaw District and Inglewood.
Right.
And I was there up until I graduated from high school. And, moving, I have to, preach about all this movement and my mom because if it wasn't for those experiences, growing up with divorced parents, growing up in an affluent neighborhood on the west side and then moving to a more low income community in South Central, or what is now known as South LA, and being around different ethnic backgrounds, which back in those days, Venice and Marina Del Rey was actually a predominantly Latino community,
Mm.
which is now not the case. It's more of
Wow.
a predominantly white area. And then moving to South Central, where it was a predominantly Black community, I was raised around very all kinds of people
Right.
from all kinds of backgrounds, and I think that definitely shaped the person that I am today, and it's humbled me and kept me rooted to where I come from, and also all the things that my mom had to do on her own for me and my sisters. So.
Wow. And how was that like for you and your sisters? And how many like siblings do you have?
So I have three older sisters total,
Okay.
but I grew up in a house with two of my oldest
Okay.
sisters. So there's three of us in total. I mean, there's four of us in total, but I grew up with two of them till since I was born. And oh my gosh, I growing up with sisters is wild.
Yeah.
Like
Especially as the younger
we
one.
Yeah, exactly. I'm grateful to be the youngest one. I'm not gonna lie. I was, I got away with a lot, but I'm so appreciative of my older sisters for, my mom put us all through college. So my older sister is a graduate of Harvard University. My middle sister is a graduate of Cal State Long Beach. And I graduated from University of San Francisco. My oldest studied law at the University of San Francisco and now is an immigration attorney. My middle sister is a director of HR in a lot of the food industry scene in Los Angeles and in New York City and Vegas. And I've, did a huge career trajectory in digital advertising space. And having sisters like that who wanted to excel, who fought for things that other people, broke glass ceilings for me, and, were authentic and were themselves, like the fact that we were all doing it and wanted to do it and weren't letting people tell us no. I had some amazing influences in my life for sure.
And I love that so much that you come from a family of like sisters that are so just already like rock stars and people that you looked up to. My question is because I know that you're first gen, much like myself. So, like, what did that grit and grind like come from? Like, maybe your mom instilling it into them, or did they just naturally just have that within them? Like, yeah, I'm just gonna go and just kill it out here in different industries. Like, you guys cover basically almost every industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. My dad was born in Mexicali, Mexico, and
Hmm.
my mother was born in San Salvador, El Salvador.
Yes.
And my mom came here when she was 21. My
Mhm.
dad came here when he was 5, and so their reality in America looked a lot different than what my reality looked like growing up.
Mhm.
And I to answer your question, I think yeah, my mom played a huge part in what work ethic looked like to me and
Right.
my sisters. And being a strong, independent woman was the definition of my mom.
Yeah.
And everything happens for a reason.
Mhm.
Do I wish that she, would have been with someone for her whole life? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the fact that she was able to do so much is what created my ambition and
Mm.
who I wanted. And so, but on the flip side of that, also reality of it was me and my sisters were in a survival mode.
Mm.
Growing up in a low income community, with not as many resources as other people get afforded, we had to every day wake up and think, all right, how am I going to make life easier for my mom? And how am I going to get to college? Because that is, in a lot of ways what America says you got to do. And this was very much true back in the late in the 90s, right? And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of it was this like hidden trauma of like keep going, work
Right.
harder, get the money, because that is going to give you the freedom to not repeat those cycles, get back
Right.
into those cycles that, comes with the generation that you're expected to fall into.
Correct.
And so, and it took me a long time to like accept that, okay, as much as all of that defined me and did make me want to be this type of person, it didn't have to also take hold of me. And
It's
so like a
true.
lot me and my sister talk about it all the time about like the survival mentality and how we have to really wash that off of us because
Right.
that's not the life we want to live or instill in future generations that, are surrounded by us.
It's so true. And just like almost as a side note, I love the fact of like, your mom handing you guys the baton and you taking that and now trying to like rewrite, like, okay, we've made it or we're making it, day by day, we're doing what we can, but we don't have to be in survival mode anymore. Like, we're in a place where we can be at peace. I know it must have been interesting moving from different, like from Venice, West LA to then Hyde Park to then South Central. Like, you're seeing so many different things. And then I went to like, predominantly white institution. I got there really on merit. I was valedictorian, A plus, and I knew that like at the time my family really didn't have money, so I knew I had to use my brain to get me into school. So there was times where I would be with people who like affluent is not even a good enough word to describe the money that they come from. And I would be like, oh man, like how can I, stand out or how can I fit in? It felt like they always had the newest resources, the newest iPhone, the newest this. And I'm just over here like walking to the library daily to go use the computer and my books. But hey, I was happy. I was just happy to be at school. But
Right.
sometimes like that can get into your mind. But then but I think it was very helpful because seeing how so many different people live, because I could be growing up adjacent to like maybe suburban white America. the hood, like so many different people. So you're able to relate to different people, but then being with other maybe like people who were better off socioeconomically, it kind of taught me like I don't have to be in survival mode. Like if the fact that I'm even here, I can see and observe and kind of just watch how other people live their lives, and they don't lead with anxiety and that fear and that like just trying to survive it. Or for me, I kind of carried that weight. Like my family did not come from Nigeria just to have me out here in the streets, like doing other things. But like, it's funny like how our parents maybe did so much to come here. And now that we're here and we're doing the thing, trying to rewrite that kind of like what could be coded into your DNA of just like survival mode. And it's like, why are you always just trying to survive? Like you're here, thrive. So I thought that was
Absolutely.
interesting.
Absolutely. And, we both went to these big universities and weren't really culturally brought up in those spaces.
Right.
And I think, both of us at a certain age, I think we both had to start seeing life through our own eyes, right?
Right.
Because you grow up and you're around certain communities and you think, whoa, this is it. This is my circle. And then when you go to a different space, and I'm so grateful and kudos to you for using those scholarships to push forth and go to those schools and stake a claim in what you deserve. I think once we entered those institutions, it was like, wait a second, what is this? What, I can be here? I can be here. There's another, maybe a few of us that look like me, and they're here too. And then I think I personally started believing like I deserve to be here,
Yeah.
that I can take up space here. Wait a second. Like, oh, hell no. It's my turn. It's
It's
my
true.
turn.
It's so
And,
true.
yeah, to your point, like there's a certain day where like the curtain comes off and it's like, okay, how am I going to continue on with the legacy that was given to me and instilled in me, and how am I going to make my parents proud, make myself proud, make my neighborhood proud, all of that. And thanks to those opportunities that we had, we were able to have that like switch, thankfully.
Definitely. And speaking of, where did you go to college?
So when I was 17, because I was one of those kids that like on the cusp of being in the grade above me.
Hmm.
I was 17. I went to University of San Francisco,
Oh, period.
and so I moved to San Francisco, which was like again my world opened up when I went out there, because
Hmm.
then I was just like inundated in a very LGBT,
Hmm.
thriving peace and love community, but also
Right.
one that was very much like, let's explore, other types of recreational enjoyment,
Yes.
like, and and then also in San Francisco, the community of Black people is so small
Hmm.
in the city itself. And
Hmm.
that was really shocking to me,
Right.
because I grew up in an area filled with beautiful Black people and one of the
Hmm.
largest communities west of the Mississippi after the 60s that moved out here. And,
Right.
so that was a real shift for me. But then in San
Hmm.
Francisco, they have one of the largest Asian communities. And
Yes.
so then I had to flip. So I'm grateful for my time in San Francisco, because I saw even more types of people and
Mm.
different types of thinking. And I'm grateful, even though like we can't not acknowledge how difficult it is to step in those spaces,
It's
because you're one
true.
in a million.
Right.
You're one in a million.
Right.
You're vulnerable. You see all these people with all this wealth, and it's like for a long time you probably have to really think. I wasn't one of these people. I think I was oblivious for a long time, like, can I take up this space? Like,
Yeah.
can I like do it? Can I tell people that I have to do work study like crazy just to have,
Yeah.
fun money, like. So I do not want to disregard the fact that those first few years in college, as someone who comes from a smaller, low income, person of color background, has to face that transition, which
Right.
is very difficult.
And what was that like point for you? Because for me too, I won't lie, like you when you go to these new spaces, you're kind of almost not like shell shocked, but you're like, oh, it's really different here. And like at least when I started school, there was like a small, like when I tell you a small community of Black people, and then with year by year, like they get more diverse. Talk list of like even Asian or Latinos, and like I was like, wow, like I hadn't been in that kind of space where it was just like so like one let me say one tone monotone. So there's times where you're like, man, can I take up space? And then even I would have professors that, you know, they see you and I feel like they kind of have their notions about you and they kind of like have that in their mind. But I would lean into my intelligence or to my smartness, or I would kind of just lean into that and prove them wrong. Luckily, there came like a fight in me that was like, I'm gonna prove these people wrong. Why are they looking at me like this? So that was like very gratifying. But at first it was challenging and tough because you had to, with each community, you had to learn new jargon. You know what I'm saying? People call it like code switching. I don't even feel like it's code switching. I feel like it's just different languages for me because I can go to so many different places and just like be in Nigeria. Recently went to Colombia, as you know, like just speak different languages and just kind of like at least kind of adjust to the culture. But I didn't realize that as a survival method, especially in these different spaces, and how important it is to expose yourself. And not that I really knew at that age what the reason would be, but I just knew that I need to be around something
Mm.
that's different than what I've always seen. So I thought that was interesting. So getting back to the question, I know that was a little aside. Like, was there a specific moment where you were like, oh, I deserve to be here? Like, what was that moment for you? What did it look like for maybe people that are listening and they're like, man, I feel like an imposter. Like, I don't know these people. When did you finally like have that awakening?
Um, so I think there was like two moments.
Okay.
My mom, there was like there's like orientation that, so back in the day, there used to be recruiters, that would come to schools and recruit specific people of color to
Mm.
their schools. And I don't know exactly what her name was, but she came to my high school and she was like, you should check out my school, right? This is so foreign, right? Like my mom didn't get recruited by colleges and like have people coming to her high school saying,
Mhm.
come to my school. So this is very new to me. I didn't have a lesson plan to go by and read and say, okay, this is what I should ask them. And I just decided to go. And so I went to this school, and it was between University of San Francisco and UC Riverside, where my best friend at the time was going. And
Mhm.
I went to UC Riverside, had an amazing time, loved the school. But my mom was like, go to the orientation, check out University of San Francisco. So I took a plane, first time on a plane by myself. And I took the Muni, which is their public transportation from the airport all the way to San Francisco. And I'm just taking this bus through these neighborhoods. And this place looks completely different from Los Angeles.
Mm.
And I get to the school. It's on this hilltop. It's just majestic looking. And I get there and I see this woman, and she's like, I'm so happy you came, right? And I was like, I just immediately broke down because I knew that I was going to go there. I knew that I was supposed to be in that city and go to that school.
Mm.
And I don't know, sometimes you have these, like your heart or tells you stuff before you even realize that it's supposed to
Right.
be. And in that moment, my heart told me, like, you're meant to be here. You deserve this experience, and you take this for yourself. And I would say that was like the defining factor of me deciding to go to University of San Francisco. But then the other thing was, once I was there, right, there's this whole thing of like, oh my God, I got into college. Hell yeah. I'm like, breaking glass ceilings. I told you, mom, I would do it. Here I am. And then it's like, okay, but here's day one.
Right.
And here we are, and you have to step out of your dorm and walk amongst all these people and be who you want to be today. You have to
Mhm.
get up every morning, be responsible, and be who you have to be. And in those first few weeks, I was lost. I didn't have
Mm.
any friends. I didn't know anybody in San Francisco. I didn't know, like, what I wanted to major in, what my life purpose was, and so you're a little bit lost.
Yeah.
And in colleges, and this is one thing I think a lot of people should take advantage of, is they have organizations. They have
Mm.
different clubs and organizations that you can be part of.
Yes.
And I was like, I missed anything that reminded me of home. And if you're from
Mm.
LA, um, the Latino, Latinx influence is strong here.
Yes.
And so I took part, I found a group called Latinas Unidas, which was at the time a group specific for um, Latina or women who identify, people who identified as female,
Hmm.
and their background was of Latinx descent.
Right.
And I leaned so far in. I leaned so far in because I was like, this is a safe space. This is a safe space. These people speak my language. These people know Spanish. These people know the struggles,
Yeah.
like and so I leaned all the way in, and they welcomed me with open arms. And when I say that these were like my older sisters from the jump, these
Mm.
girls till this day I can call them and be like, this is a weird space, how can I get through this? And so I'm without them I would not have had
Mm.
a community at University of San Francisco. And years later I
Mm.
became the president of that organization my senior year in college, because these are the spaces that are they're we're running out of them, and so we
Right.
need to hold for those girls or those boys, or they or she or he that want to go to college and don't are afraid and need
Right.
somebody to say, hey, I'm here for you, I got you, we got this.
Right.
So I think those two experiences were those definitive moments where, like, okay, I got someone here to say, I got your back, you're supposed to be here. And
Mhm.
then I also got you and your intuition saying, wow, this is going to be an experience, jump right in and go for it.
I love that so much. And even just you explaining this explains so much about you and just how you've kind of also been that space, because you were that space for me, like, working at these like large corporations. Like for me, I was like bright eyed. At that time I had come from a startup, so that culture is completely different from like an established like global agency. And I had gone through some things, and you were that safe space for me. And you would like give me tips and be like, oh, here, like, don't like use your emotions, lead with data, like data, like write it down, like here's what you should do. And you were an amazing space for me. So I love that you not only found a space for yourself while at college, but then you've become that for so many people. And like, Juanita's the best person to have in your corner. Every single time this girl will write me a letter of recommendation for a job or anything, and we might not even be in touch for a long time, but like it'll be like no time has passed. You're always sending resources. So I love that not only did you receive that for yourself, but you are truly the definition of being that space for so many other people. So I love that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you for continuing that legacy in what you're doing right now, because I wouldn't have been able to share. And I was so excited because you never get the opportunity really to share your
It's
story,
true.
in this type of detail. And not that I'm like I'm no Michelle Obama, but I am someone that also can help other people. And I'm appreciative of the space that you created here. And so, Jessica, you're doing the same exact
Oh.
thing as I did for you. And so this is gonna spread waves into, hopefully, someone somewhere
Mm.
out there clicks a link, listens to this podcast, and she's like, damn, Jessica and Juani, all right, I'm inspired.
I'm happy you said
Mm.
that because that's really the goal. I just want to help people because I wish I had it myself. I'm like, dang, like I wish I heard people's stories. Like, obviously, you hear podcasts about relationships and all these other things, which is great, but not really too many of career, like for the middle people. It's either top level, like CEOs, like, people who are killing it on a high level, like multi-million dollar businesses and companies. But what about the people who are like, on their way there? So I'm happy that you
Mhm.
said that. And I really hope that it helps somebody. And that's why I'm happy to like have different people from different backgrounds come on because there's somebody that's always going to relate to something. So I love that. And
Absolutely.
speaking of, because we're playing humble over here, so flash forward. So today you're a QA analyst, but can you walk me through your career from graduation of college until today? Because you're just sitting here like, so chilled out, so humble, but you've worked for some amazing accounts globally. You're an amazing analyst as well, among other things. So maybe get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied abroad in Argentina, which
Ooh.
I finessed the system, and that afforded me a double major in Latin American studies and international business. And when I graduated in 2011, I was like, I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to be this awesome businesswoman. And here I go. And we were at the tail end of a recession, and
Mhm.
that was not the case.
Right.
I'm a true millennial in the fact that I graduated, I got an internship as my first job making $12 an hour, which was the same amount I made when I first started working at 15 and a half at the local pool.
Mm.
So it was not an easy road that
Right.
me and a lot of other people that graduated in 2011 had to go through. This was during the time where newspapers were, not existent. The internet was really coming to power.
Right.
And so a lot of jobs were changing right now. We were in the middle of it. And so I graduated, got an internship, and I was like, oh, hell no, I didn't go to college to be making $12 an hour. What the hell?
Right.
So I was very hungry in my early age. So I started from the ground up. I was what you call, after my internship, an appointment setter, and I got into marketing and sales after that, and I just kept wanting more, and
Right.
I knew what I was worth. And so I ended up getting into advertising. And in the advertising world, you work at what's known as agencies, and the agencies work for the big brands, and they do the advertising for these brands. So I worked for different large conglomerate agencies. I covered accounts like Adidas and
Mhm.
Sony, Jack in the Box. The last one that I worked on, one of the last ones that I worked on, and where I think I peaked in my capitalistic corporate America career, was at Apple. I was the director of marketing sciences for Apple's digital advertising division globally. Um, and man, that was over. And I think it's important to be transparent with this conversation because it's 2024. I started making $12 an hour, which was equivalent to $24,000 a year,
Mm.
and I was 20 at the time. And when I finished at Apple in the advertising space, I was 30 years old, and I made up maxed at $175,000. And I think in the space of marketing sciences, also known as reporting, analytics, and a data driven technical adjacent space, I was one of the few women and women of color
Right.
in that space. And I I peaked. I was like, this is it. This is it. I am the president of the United States of America, basically, is what I thought. I was like, oh, I'm Beyonce.
I know that's
I
right, Sasha
am,
Fierce, like, Rihanna, let's
yes,
go.
absolutely. That's who I am. America Ferrera out here. I am Barbie, like I am all of it.
Yes.
And um and then I started realizing, I had my COVID epiphany, and I'm sure a lot of people went through a lot during COVID. And my epiphany was, is this the choice that I decided, or was this the choice that society and maybe
Mm.
my mom and maybe some really intense motivation by managers to take on these roles? And I dug real deep, and I had to acknowledge that maybe this wasn't my happiness.
Yeah.
This was a happiness that America told me that I had to reach to, buy a house, to be financially stable, to, that was going to dictate the type of person I was. And at the end of the day, I don't think I had to accept that this wasn't really making me happy.
Right.
Did I feel did I feel accomplished? Absolutely, absolutely. But at that point, after I peaked and was living the day to day, was I truly happy doing the
Mm.
work I was doing? And
Mm.
I wasn't. And that's okay. That was my truth.
Right.
And I 3 years ago made the decision to quit advertising,
Mm.
and now I am starting from the ground again, and I work as an entry level quality assurance analyst, which means I'm doing a lot of um, quality control work to make sure that the company I work for, their website works properly. And what for me is very elementary type of work compared to the
Right.
very intense work that I was doing emotionally, mentally, physically work that I was doing before, to now like giving my brain and my heart and my peace of mind a little bit of rest. And
Mhm.
now I started at this company 3 years ago at $74,000. I'm at $86,000 now. But right, that's from 175 to 74. That's a huge jump.
Yes, it is.
And and that is something that I had to mull over and ask myself, like, what is your happiness worth? Do you wake up every day like doing the things you love to do? Do you have space and time to do those, or are you just working to work? And I was working to work, and now at my company, I wake up and I read for 2 hours. I work out in the morning for 2 hours. My company challenges me, but also really prioritizes work life balance. Like, I work for a company that their product is fitness and health. And instead of like advertising these big brands and,
Right.
fueling capitalistic America, I'm out here
Right.
telling people, go work out, go move, go step outside and see the sun today. And I've never been happier.
Mm.
And I just want to end with saying, like, in those moments where I had to make less money, um, I was like, "How am I gonna live?
Mhm.
How am I gonna buy groceries and travel?" And it's like, "Honey, your mom." my mom the reality is my mom slept on a couch for a majority of her life so that her daughters can have bedrooms and
Right.
beds. We had to, my mom, you couldn't keep the lights on if you weren't in a room because that's wasting electricity and that's wasting money. Like, I had to ride the metro bus till I was 23 in Los Angeles because I couldn't afford my a first car. And I had to humble myself and remind myself where I came from and say, $74,000 is a lot of money to a lot of people.
It
And
is.
you can do a lot with that.
Mhm.
And you better recognize and get your perspective back in order, because my mom made $44,000 her whole life and took care of 3 kids. So, Juani, you better get to it because you can do it.
Yeah.
And I had to have those hard conversations with myself and take myself out of that reality that I thought I was living in. And yeah, so the more money I've ever had in my savings account. I'm out here living a humble life, and I've never been happier. And that's my truth. For
Right.
the people who are in corporate America killing it, that's awesome. But I didn't have my mental capacity was not there for it. So that's long-winded story about who I am, but I thought it was important to break it down for the
Yeah.
representation of people out there that are navigating that career trajectory.
And I love your humility in that new beginning because we're entering into a time where so many people are starting over. Like some of it is forced, some of it is a choice due to like COVID and then resulting from that health reasons because a lot of people were working like nonstop still during COVID. And people are looking to start over. Some people are getting laid off. So to hear you make a choice to because I was gonna ask you, I was gonna say, girl, please give me all your tips. I was gonna ask you a question about balance. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna ask her about balance because Juanita, all I know, she's into health and fitness. She travels. She's in a relationship. She still has time for her friends, and like she still makes time to work. I was gonna say, girl, what? How are you doing this?
Mm.
And I was gonna also ask, like, what are the balance of your priorities? But you kind of answered it in just what your statement, what you just said. So I think that's a message to so many people that, if it's not working for you, you can change that. I know it can be scary, especially like, other people could be like, are you crazy? Like 80 to $100,000 less. But putting into perspective, like my parents, when they came to this country, they were working at McDonald's. My dad was driving a taxi. Like, he made it in business, went through things in life. We lost a lot, but, you know, the fact that we could be humble up and down. And I was sometimes you just have to have that perspective. And I realized, like, traveling to Nigeria, traveling, like, Mexico, Colombia, even Greece, you go to so many different places and they don't actually have as much as we have. Like, even some of us that feel like, oh, we're struggling, we still have a lot more. And people are making do, they're happy, they're joyful. And that's one thing I kind of learned through traveling. Not necessarily just COVID, but like through traveling. I was like, I just need to get out after COVID. Like, I just need to travel and just be away. But it kind of gave me that perspective, like, why they would ask, and people would ask me, like, why are you working so hard? Or like, why are you killing yourself? Like, trying to, overextend yourself. They said, live life. So to kind of get out of that mindset, I honestly, like, you're low key a hero to me, because not a lot of people would do that. They would just kind of keep like in the rat race, like continuing to get the bag. But now seeing you, you look so healthy, so vibrant, like, so applaud, much applause to
Thank
you
you.
there. Did your mom or your sisters, like, did they have any feedback, or were you like, I don't care what anybody says? Like, what was that like telling your family? I'm sure, because that's different, like working with Apple at the top, like the peak, like you couldn't really go much higher than that, to now starting literally entry level.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my mom, she comes from a different time and a different day and age. And so I think it was really hard for her
Mm,
to understand. But then before I did the shift, I actually moved in with her
okay.
because I was going through a breakup and I
Mm,
had to go back home for a bit.
mhm,
And before I moved in, she was like, what do you mean? Just find another agency, find another, just stay in analytics, but don't work in advertising. And no, no, no. It's so how could you do this to us?
mm.
Like, and then
Yeah.
I moved in with her and she was like, why don't you leave your desk for 13
Yeah.
hours? Like, why are your legs so inflamed from not getting up? You have
Yeah.
so much inflammation. Why aren't you, why is your skin so poor? And like,
Mm,
why is your boss calling you at 10 p.m. and like, why are you so stressed and you're only, 30? And then it took her to visibly see
right.
that I was like deteriorating at such a young age from this like really intense job.
Mhm.
And then she was like, do what's best for you.
Yeah.
And once like I got another job and they liked me, and it was with my mom, it's very in a lot of ways toxica, like
Yeah.
very just like prove to me, prove to
Yeah.
me. And so she was like, okay, you can keep this job, you can actually get another job in something different, you're smart and you can do it now, it's okay,
Yeah.
that's her mentality. I don't. Thankfully, I've not needed her approval and like
Yeah.
her what I she afford. But I just want to make sure to give her a peace of mind for sure
Right.
at her age. I can sustain my life and do something different.
Right.
I think the biggest advocate for me was my sister,
Mm.
because she was actually going through the same thing. She left a job. She was a mother. She's a mother. So
Okay.
she left her job and did something similar so that she could spend more time with her daughter. And I thought that was so admirable, and it was very influential to me to do the same thing. And
Mhm.
thankfully we had each other, and I would see her and we would just connect once a week and tell each other like, okay, but what does we would talk about our trauma. We would trauma
Mhm.
bond, talk about like, wow, how much our mom worked, and then how we thought that that was normal. And then we would have to like really insect it and say like, wait, no, maybe that's not normal,
Mm.
Christina. And like, what does happiness look like? If you could have any job in the world, no
Mm.
money mattered, what would it look like? And these were the conversations that we were having with each other. And it was very much a talk of like, we can do whatever we want to do and still be successful,
Right.
and don't be scared. And so I think without, my sister, and in a lot of ways my mom, taking
Mhm.
care of me in that
Mhm.
first year when I went back home, I wouldn't have been able to do it. It would have been very, very difficult.
Right. And I love that you're a true analyst through and through, because you don't just take life as it is. You ask why. You try to figure out what are the variables that's causing this. And so I love your approach. Like, you definitely have like, and it still like was what you wanted to be. Like you said, a banker as a young child, but like just having that analytical mindset, working with numbers, working with variables, like, okay, if this then that, so then what can I change, like how can I change the input to change the output? So I like that you and your sister, like, again, the thread of community and just like really rethinking that. I think this conversation will be refreshing to so many who are really going through the same thing, but they're scared. Like, sometimes when you make a certain amount of money, you think you can't ever live on, a little bit less, even though it's actually much higher than literally like what most of Americans actually they're not making that kind of income. So the fact that you could bond, and like I think another thing that stood out to me is like having your mom, like having her see a visual of what it's doing to you, because you can talk to your parents and they're like, nah, we worked all this time, but until they see it, they're like, oh no, it's okay. So like I can relate to that. So wow. So, and if we're able, like, let me know too if we're able to talk about this. But I know you mentioned too that you've kind of dealt with ADHD, and I know that could be very difficult with the work, especially the work that you have done. And I know a lot of people deal with it. Maybe they don't like vocalize it, but at least now more people are free to say like, "Hey, I'm dealing with this." How were you faring, or how did you navigate that experience at work? Because I feel like that's just way too many variables. Like, okay, talk us of ADHD, dealing with that, being a woman of color, being a woman first, and then a woman of color, and then first gen. So like this is your kind of trailblazing, and the spaces that that we're in, how they look like. So how did you navigate all of that and not literally implode?
It's a beautiful question, and I appreciate the time to talk about my experience. I discovered that I had ADHD when I was in college,
Mm,
and you know, I look back now and I'm like, no wonder I didn't like school
mm,
education systems. Like it wasn't built for people like me, where you have to sit for hours on end and then just listen to someone talk. It's just like completely the opposite of what I need
right.
to, educate myself. Um, and then when I went out into the workforce, I realized that it was a superpower.
Mm.
It is my superpower. And I'm able to multitask like a mother. And I am able to, what is very difficult for certain people is a lot simpler for me. And I can do it at a speed that is very fast. And I can do it between a 90 to 100% accuracy level. And I leaned into that, and I didn't see I really changed my perspective of what ADHD was in that moment. And I was like, and in a lot of ways in my 20s I was using it for the wrong things.
Mm,
I was going out too much and like doing a lot of coping
mhm,
situations, and leaning into certain things that
mhm,
were causing me more pain than they were happiness. And as I got older is when I realized I need to understand what my ADHD is
yeah.
and use it in a way that's productive for who I am as a human being. And until I started really doing my research and education in it, and I was like, oh no, I need to have boundaries with like work. I need to have
Right.
boundaries with social settings. I need to have boundaries with financial decisions I make. There's a lot of things I have to do to navigate that. Um, and I've learned to embrace
Okay.
the person that I am.
Mhm,
Not until I decided to move away from advertising and start truly loving myself and all of myself. The decision that I made to move to the job I am now was a decision to love myself more
mm,
and to choose me and to say, Juani, you're number one in my life. And I'm going to cater to you, and I'm going to embrace you, and I'm going to start loving you the way you deserve to be loved.
mhm,
And all of you, which included my ADHD, which included being a Latina, which included growing up poor, which included having a parent who has a very strong Spanish accent,
mhm,
and embracing that. And there's a huge topic right now about likability in
mhm,
corporate places and in society, and if people like us should be more likable.
mm,
And I think the conversation should not be around whether you're liked or not. The
Right.
conversation should be around, are you living in your truth?
Yeah.
Are you being authentic? If you're trying to be liked by other people, you're conforming, you're
Right.
assimilating.
Right.
And that's not what you were put on this earth to do. You were put on this earth to be your wholehearted self.
Mhm.
And if someone else or some type of other place cannot value you, that's
Mhm.
their problem.
Right.
And they're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. And or you're not meant to take up space there because they
Right.
don't value you. And so I have had to really lean into who I am and be
Right.
like, okay, this might make you feel weird because these people have never been around someone like you. So you're
Mhm.
going to be a first for them. And it might feel uncomfortable and vulnerable for you, but do it.
Right.
Do it,
Right.
because and so I've started to really move in my truth, be my authentic self, and not worry about being likable. I'm worried about being myself and loving myself. And I had one of my best friends, who is now my best friend.
Mhm.
She started working with me, and she is a huge high level person in the advertising space. She knows how to walk in that space, and
Yeah.
she does a damn good job at it, and
Mhm.
I commend her for that. And when I met her, she was this person that I'm describing.
Mm.
She was her full self. She spoke her truth. She knew her boundaries. She was well spoken, educated, and she was everything I was. And yet I wasn't walking the way she was walking. And
Right.
I was like, how do I get there? I want to be that truth. And it's very true what they say, surround yourself by people that you want to be like,
Right.
or that people that share the same values, the same goals that you have. And so I am so grateful for having her in my life. And I've kept her as much as I can. I've kept her in my life because she's so wonderful. But she was able to open that door for me and
Mm.
allow me to say, okay, guess what? I can be a director in advertising at Apple, but I can also wear hoops, and I
Okay.
can also speak with some spiciness, and it's not me trying to offend anybody.
Right.
Um, so I say that all to say that it took a long time to do a lot of self-discovery in corporate America and in these spaces where we might want to make ourselves smaller,
It's true.
to realize that we don't need to do that. We've worked hard enough and long enough, and our ancestors have also been through a lot for
Yeah.
us to make pave our ways.
I love that you said that. And I love the power in just showing up authentically and, being yourself. It's not easy to be a culture changer because that's what you're doing when you're being authentic. Some people can embrace it, some people can like fight against it. For the most part, at least when I was working with you, I was myself, walking into work every day with heels, like, come dressed, come like, just trying to bring joy to the space, like, because sometimes it can be so serious. I remember we used to say it's PR, not the ER, like, and just try to, be your authentic self. And luckily, it was like for the most part, it was met with, grace. Obviously, there's some people that might find friction in that, but I think the more people that can, be bold and walk authentically, it gives another person permission. Just like you saw your best friend do it, now you're doing it, and now another girl's doing it, and another person watching this is like, you know what, I could be myself. I can wear my hoops, I can be myself, I can talk the way I need to talk, I can be a sports lover in the office, like I can do whatever I need to do and still show up and do the work, because at the end of the day, the quality of the work, it hasn't changed and everything's getting done. But now with, that authenticity, because, in corporate, sometimes you're like trying to figure out, like, in this email, okay, like, what did this person mean? But if they already know you to be authentic, they'll already know where you're coming from. So it kind of allows people to let their guards down and just collaborate instead of it being so hostile. So I love
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
I
And Jessica, you've always maintained your character,
Thank
and
you.
that's one thing I really have adored about you. Like you lead with love, you lead with kindness, and I think I surround myself with people like that. When I go to work every day, my character is on the line
It's
every
true.
day. And I am a representation of what I look like.
Right.
So I need to show up and also show a true character of kindness and love. And I think you do a great job at doing that, Jessica, while also staying authentic and putting forth the energy to walk outside of what's comfortable for you and do
Right.
things like this and have these kinds of conversations that aren't easy. And I hope that, it took me in my 30s to start like really, really breaking out and being who I want to be. And I
Mhm.
hope someone who's 12 years old,
Okay.
15, 20, they listen to this and they're like, I can start now. I
Yes.
don't have to be 4. I can start now. And, and it's a ripple effect. It really can be a ripple effect.
Definitely, definitely. I love this conversation. We could literally continue forever. I need to bring you back, but I know we have to wrap it up. So at the end of each podcast, I ask a few questions. So the first question is, I know you kind of answered this like throughout, but what was a struggle bus moment for you?
Can you expand on the struggle, Bless?
Yeah, struggle bus is like a time that you're going through something that's like either so tough, you don't know how you're going to get out of it. It might lead to like a defining moment where you're like, oh, I need to change, make a change in my life. But a time where you're
Mhm.
struggling, it could be as it relates to your career or your personal life. Um, but just a struggle moment that you'd
Yeah.
like to share.
I have a couple. I think when I was 6 and my
Yeah.
parents divorced, I think that was a really defining moment in my life
Hmm.
where I, I've allowed myself to let a lot of trauma seep into my life, and it defined me for a long time. And not until I shout out to Sheena, who was my life coach, and she helped me navigate through that trauma, which I'm still working on till this day. I think, all of that built Juani and who I am today. And so that is a defining moment in my life. And the other one I would say is, I lost my high school sweetheart and
Mm,
the first love of my life when I was in my late late 20s, early 20s.
mm,
And when you lose someone that has such an impact, and I hope people don't lose many people in their lives,
right.
but I thankfully I'm grateful I haven't lost a lot of people in my life, but
Yeah.
this one person definitely struck a nerve. And so because of that, it really just changed the way I look at life and how I walk every day in the light, in his light.
Right.
And so I don't try to take anything for granted because not everyone is afforded tomorrow.
It's
And so I
true.
think those two like are consistent reminders in my daily life of stuff that's not healed and maybe will never be, but it
Mm.
helps me to like see this perspective and to want to continue to grow.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And it's crazy, like, you can know somebody for so long and not know, like, the little details of, like, what makes them tick and what gives them motivation, so I appreciate you sharing that. The next question is, what moment were you most proud of yourself as it relates to your profession?
I think hitting Apple was like such a huge, like a pinnacle for me. And I did it. I feel like Kobe, where like he was
Mhm.
so young when he like killed it. And, then he could, rest in peace. He
Yeah,
had his time with his kids that he did have. But like, I feel like at a young age in my career, what I considered my career in that place in my life, working at on Apple and their division and the time of technology was huge for me.
yeah,
And I look forward to the next like biggest thing I do in my career. I'd say academically, I actually just finished a year-long program for massage therapy. So I went back to school, and I think going back to school as an adult and deciding to do another educational career change is enormous. And so I'm looking forward to doing more rewarding, healing work with individuals. So that's another one for me.
I love this so much. Oh my gosh, we're gonna have to talk about that part later, okay? What is your definition now of success?
Happiness,
Mm.
happiness. And I think peace,
Yeah.
taking care of your peace and your happiness, and surrounding yourselves by people that you love.
Yeah.
I, you know, my sweetheart, brings me so much joy
Mm.
and peace of mind.
Mhm.
And the time I have with my mother, in her later years, is something that I'm so grateful of. And this whole career change has allowed me the time and the space to be with these types of people
Yeah.
and to be there 100%. So I think always, prioritize your happiness
Mhm.
and your peace of mind, and
Yes.
making sure that your heart is still fueled with love. I think those are big, big things, especially nowadays in the society we live in. We need that.
We do need that like connection, peace, happiness, and even in your face, like your whole like being is like radiant, you know. And it's nice to see you like smiling. Like sometimes you can be working in these places and you don't realize that you can like jump out of these places. You can, take a leap and change your reality. You don't have to continue being, and even you just going back to school, I mean, I think it's gonna give a lot of people perspective. Like, you don't have to just stop, like, okay, after you graduate college, like, that's the end of it. Then I have to work for 40 years of my life and then retire and then hope that what I get from retirement, barring inflation, is enough for me to. No, I like that you're changing the narrative. And I know that your future generations, like, they'll even start from a late, like, where you're like ending, they're gonna have that starting point and go forth. So I love that.
It's a journey. Absolutely, Jessica. It's a journey. You and I can speak to that. It
Yeah.
does not happen overnight.
Mm-mm.
If you're 60 and you're listening to this,
Yeah.
there's always a time to start. So, yeah, I again, kudos to you for creating this space and letting me speak to my specific experience. And I whatever you need from here on out, I'm here for you. And I know a
Oh,
ton of people that would love to also, um, speak with you.
thank you.
Okay.
I'd be happy to have those people on. And final question is, what piece of advice would you give to people who are looking to advance professionally?
Um, so I really think people need to really look deep inside and ask themselves, why am I working here? Is it is it a side hustle? Like, are you really working at this job because it's a side hustle to help fuel your what you really want to do? Or is this what you're really passionate and you want to be the VP, and really make moves? Or, like, you're just doing it because you're a mom and these kids need, X, Y, and Z, but like going home and being with those kids, that's what makes me happy. Like, really think about what it is you're doing for work, and then, switch gears based on that. And so if it is just the side hustle, make sure you're there every day and on time and doing what you're supposed to do, the bare minimum, right? And keeping that consistent. If you are very much trying to move up and you have found that your passion is, to excel and be the director, be proactive, make relationships with the right people, speak on calls, and don't be afraid to do so. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't be afraid, to mess up, because guess what? People are watching you and they care that people try, because it takes a lot just to try to be better at your job.
Ah, Juanita, this is so, so amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today. This conversation was just everything and more. You really just shared so many valuable insights and things that will really help people in their journey as it is right now, whether they want to start fresh or whether they're in a space of reevaluation. I just know that your story is going to give people so much courage. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. Juanita was so amazing. She shared so much. Share this with your friends, your colleagues, anybody you know who could benefit from hearing Juanita's story. Until next time, bye, besties.